understanding of exactly how you want your game to play and what's going to be in there. What else is there? General draft structure. Also, an emphasis on selling your game. For those of you who were here on Monday and we had a bit of a chat about it in class, just trying to show us the compelling reasons that your game should be made. Why should we want to play it? Even if the mechanics are well thought out, that doesn't necessarily make it appealing. So try and figure out what those selling points are. On top of that, what we'll do is we'll do a split. Billy will jump into the Discord as well as discuss with anyone who comes in late or is currently in studio, and I will jump straight into Zoom and work my way through everyone waiting in there. Again, once we've gone through all of those, feel free to hang around. If you want questions, discussions, we'll be here for the duration of the class period. And there we will start, once we head into next week, start looking a bit more closely at the fine detail regarding submission requirements, and we'll have a look at the pitching process. Are there any questions right now? Feel free to throw them into the MDDN chat.
Tui is just saying that they're going to be doing the stuff today. The Discord people can't hear me, so I'm just repeating some of what he said for Discord. Is that they're going over the GDD and looking at getting people structured together for the design aspects. Now, what we're going to be covering in 313 is I will be showing off some
very good
stuff.
Okay, Discord, Billy will be with you shortly, and Zoom, I'll be with you in a moment. We'll just quickly go through the role.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will leave that. Okay, so this was just so as a starter, that was Tui going through what the designers are doing today. So the designers in this lab, there's only one actually in the lab, so everyone else will be online, is that the designers will be looking through their game design documents because at this stage, the programmers are still learning Unity and learning Unreal, and the designers are working through their initial game design ideas. So what I'm going to do is I thought I would continue through with some of the discussion on Unreal and also answer any questions or show people things that they're interested in about using Unreal, and also potentially show off some of the ways that I find out how to do things in Unreal, which is also an important skill. So I've got my Twitch chat there. I've got someone who's given me a honk. Excellent, thank you, Binshu. Fabulous. And if we have a look at Discord, I've got my Discord chat up. Questions. So I have a question in Discord. If you're on Discord in the top, yes, in the far top corner, way over there, there's the little icon for chat. So I have to remember that's way up there. But on me, it's down here when I'm looking at the screen. So, one question. Is using engine behavior tree editor sufficient for implementing an AI technology for the assignment? Is it sufficient? Well, it kind of depends on how much you learn and what you can do with it. I'm not interested in your final product, right? So this is one of those the big differences, I suppose. I meant to go. Where am I? Oh, I thought I had it set up so that I would be. No, I'm just going through finding. Why is my full screen not? That's me from there, that direction. Alright, I'm just trying to work out which of these is supposed to be the scene that I'm... Oh, where's my full screen one? Has disappeared. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to find the one which is me full screen. Yeah, so the question was, is just using the AI behavior tree in Unreal enough for implementing AI? And the answer is I'm interested in what you learn, not what end product you produce, right? This is not about producing a final... This is not a about the production output. This is about you learning as much as you can. So, if you learn a huge amount by implementing an AI in the behavior tree, and you can talk about what you learned, then great. That's good learning, and when you reflect on that learning and you talk about it, you'll show that you learned a lot. If you just copy and pasted a pre-built tutorial and didn't learn anything, then you haven't learnt anything, right? Even if the end product was identical, the learning wasn't there. So this isn't about finding a new product, because certainly one of the big challenges is that we have this massive challenge that anything I set, any task I set, any potential output that I try and assess, you'll be able to find something that just does that automatically, right? You'll be able to find some piece of some output out there, or you might be finding a template that someone's made, or some piece of code on GitHub or GitLab or somewhere else that produces the output that I have specified, that I don't know about. And so I don't know whether or not you've just copied that or whether you've written it yourself. So the only chance we have is for you to have the integrity and intent to actually learn something. And so when you do this, you're doing it to learn, not to do the minimum output production. So if you feel like you've learned a lot and you can express what you've learnt by doing the task, that's good. We'll look at what you've done and assess you on your delta, how much you've learnt in that process, rather than just measuring you at the end point of where you've got to. Okay, so this is trying to change the assessment from I know where everybody is and I'm going to measure where they get to being, rather than they're all starting here and therefore if they get to there, that's good, and so I just measure, does everybody get to this point? It's kind of, well, no, that doesn't make sense. You're all at different points, you're all learning different things, so we need to be better at reflecting that. Now, some of you, yes, if you've already done a lot of game development, will also be able to show off more of those skills, and so yes, if you get great stuff that you've made, then yeah, that's going to get high marks, even if you've been quite good at the stuff previously. But that's not the only way to get reasonable marks, is to be amazing and already have done a lot, right? So I'm quite interested in the learning process rather than just the final output. So the short answer is yes, it could be fine. The long answer is, well, make sure you're learning something. Okay, so let's see what other Discord questions. Right. Thanks, Ben. I'm glad that makes sense. Right, so what would people like me to show off first? Now, I actually have like a bunch of content. So I have a lecture that I can give on what games are. I can give a lecture on what the game, what game architecture is, and I also have an Unreal session that I was going to go through, which I suggested I was going to add a C++ function to an Unreal project. Right? So, do we have, if you're on Discord or Twitch, people have a preference as to which one of those that I should do? Add a C++ function? Sweet, I can do that. That seems like the first feedback from the audience was, hey Simon, add a C++ function. Okay, so let's grab this up. I'll make myself a wee bit smaller because you don't actually need to see me so much. I'll just grab that, make it a wee bit smaller. I'm recording this. Okay, so we have various top-down assignments. So this was the one that I had started the other day, where we'd added the blueprint for something dropping on my head, right? So that was what I did last week. I was looking at that. Oh, and I've been I'm in active discussion on how we solve the hard drive space limit in Git, because it looks like we're going to need a lot of storage. And so we'll be using Git LFS. We may or may not have to get you to point your Git LFS at a different URL location. So I'll take you through the setup of that, because the situation is that our GitLab server is designed around small code-based projects rather than massive game projects. And because it's focused on small projects, its throughput and its capacity and the bandwidth are optimized for that. Now, with GitLFS, what you do is you say all of the text files will use your fast response system, right? So we keep GitLab working well for everybody by having it only small files being transferred. And we'll create a second server for big files, and it will use HTTPS, and it will do asynchronous downloads. So when you do a checkout, you don't immediately get all the files, you get all of the small files immediately from Git, because it does that synchronously, right? And then asynchronously, it starts downloading all of the large binaries. So that might take a few minutes while it slowly downloads all of the large assets that you have in your project. However, that means we need a second server with good bandwidth, which has like large storage, right? So that's what we're currently working on, is finding out where that should be and how that should be. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll do my game engine architecture talk tonight, where we go through more of the history and the backgrounds of game architectures, and I'll show you adding the C++. So if we go to this project, I'll just see if this project is the one I think it was. So this one, last time I checked, when I walked underneath this, when I was directly underneath it. Ah, that's right, because oh, yes, I ran away from it. So when I was directly underneath it, it falls down on my head. Okay, so that was the behavior. And over here, when I click on, oh, yeah, so if I stop this, I click on that object, and we did that by creating a new small, the comfort cube, which is this blue, sort of slightly soft-looking cube, and it created I created a new subclass which had a blueprint attached, right? So this has under here, if we go to blueprint, open blueprint editor, and I'll bring the blueprint editor up. So in the blueprint editor, remember we did this thing where I've got these watched, but it's distance to player. I did this distance to player calculation by working out those two vectors, and then seeing if they were less than or equal to the trap distance, which became a variable which you could see outside of the blueprint, right? Which is, if we have a look at here, and I decrease the size of that, decrease the size of that, variable trap distance is a visible float. This is saying it's visible, and so if I go and if I had another block that had this, I'd be able to set that as a separate value per instance, right? So it's not saved in the blueprint, it's saved as a variable that can be set outside of the blueprint code. So we set that up. Now what I might want to do is say, well, actually, I've got this falling down behavior. But so one of the things that I was doing in this falling down behavior is I was doing these two functions here where I was zeroing out z, and then doing a vector distance. Okay. Now, what that is this is a function, right? It's a matrix multiply function. It's a multiply. And it takes a vector multiply. It takes a vector in. It takes two vectors in. One of these vectors is the zeroing out vector, which zeroes out z. But I could create a distance calculation as a take in a 3D vector and put out a distance, right? So return value. So what I want to do is I want to take a function. I want to make a function that takes in two vectors, two three-dimensional vectors, and outputs a distance. So I'm going to take these two and turn that into a function in C++. Right? Now, I could, if I wanted to, also click on these three and then right click and then collapse to function. So in blueprints, I could go collapse to function. And what that would do is that would create a new function which does just what I said it should do. And this is, I would then rename it. So ground distance, call it something like that. Ground distance, and boy, no, that, yes, click there, delete that. Now go ground distance. So this would be the ground distance function, and it will take in two vectors. It takes in a target self, but because it's a function, it expects to be called, right? So because it's a function that needs to be calculated, it's saying, hey, I need a time when you want me to run this particular calculation, right? So this won't actually update the return value until you put it in as part of the sequence of activities. So you'd have to run this to here, and then now you can shift click and it will just connect those, right? So that's another, if you hold down shift and click on one of these and then click on the next one, it'll make that connection. So that would then do that calculation and then go to the branch. So this would be like calling this calculation function just before you then call the if statement in code. Now, I don't actually need it to be a full function. So, or actually, if I just undo those and I take that back, I could, instead of making it a full function, which needs the executable, I could go these, right click, and if I make it a, so that's a single input node, I think collapse nodes will make a new node which will give me what I need it to be. And here I can go, I can rename this as ground distance, and that gives me a node that now does what I kind of expected it to do, which is to it's collapsed the graph into two vectors coming in with a return value, right? And that means I've hidden inside this. I can now go in, I can double click on it, go inside and see what I've done in there, right? So that would be output return value, distance, and so input is those two, output is that one, and this is the bit in the middle. And so if I go back to the event graph, because you see if I double click in here, it takes me to a different level. So it says there's another graph underneath event graph. So this is now my event graph. And you know, that can be quite useful to clean up your things. But what I now want to do is create this as a separate C++ function. Okay. So what we do is, of course, it's programming. It means it's multiple ways of doing things. But if we go to tools and a new C++ class, we're then given a whole bunch of options to do, right? So we could work through each one of these and what they do. So I can try and explain them. You can also read them. But none is just it's a default constructor. It's just basically an empty C++ class that will be compiled, but you then have to work out how to tie it into everything else. We have a character class. So the characters are human-like characters. So a character is inherits from actor and object, and is a specific type of pawn. So it's a specific type that has humanoid-like movement. Okay, so that's a character. A pawn is anything you control. So if you had like a rolling ball game, that would be, you would be controlling the pawn, which is the rolling ball, rather than a character, because the rolling ball isn't a character because it's not humanoid. right? That's just the terminology that Unreal uses. Actors are basically anything that can be interacted with. So that falling block is an actor, right? It's not a pawn because I, as a player, am not controlling it. But it is something that moves around, right? So it inherits from all the objects and can be placed or spawned, right? So it's and it can interact, right? So it can contain act components and things. If you have a playable character, right, or if you have an AI that's controlling that proper AI that's moving around and interacting and is supposed to have regular updates and be doing those sort of things, then that becomes something you'd call a pawn, rather than just using an actor. However, you can kind of turn an actor into a full pawn if you just added more code to it. So again, it's not that these are exclusionary and you can only do things in one way. You can create an object and then add all of the features of an actor and then add all the features of a pawn, right? So those are all possible. So actors, we get actor components. So an actor component would be something like so this is an entity component. In an entity component system, the idea is that you have like an actor, a player, and you can add components to things, and components are features or sets of actions or sets of behaviors that can be connected to an object to run. So the actor component is, let's say, magnetism was something that I could have, right? So magnetism isn't built into the game, but I could build a magnetism system and then make a magnetic component that I could add to an actor. And when I added that component to an actor, that actor would become magnetic and would attract all iron-based objects, right? So, and then I'd need a material property added to the object. Say, yes, this is a ferrous object, so this has iron in it, and therefore, when an actor is near it, that actor will be attracted to that metal object and vice versa, right? So there'll be a mutual force between them. And, I could say, check the magnetism of the object and see if you're the same polarity. So you could write a whole component system of adding magnetism to an actor, right? So that would be an act component. A scene component would be where you would add something that would be added to scenes. So this, you could have had a lighting, maybe there's a fog system that you'd want to add some interesting scene component, so that would be added to the world. So it's not a component that's associated necessarily with a particular character in that world. It's associated with a particular level or a particular scene, and so some levels may have the mist system in them, some might not. So you're not adding it as default to every level. You're adding it as a component that you would add to a scene if you needed that operation component. Okay, so those are higher level, bigger systems, and certainly if you want to code most of your game in C++, you could start doing all of these and coding your own C++ code for all of this. There's game mode base, which is basically that's where if you're writing your game in C++, that's where you'd write your game, right? And there's world settings classes, so you've got to be able to see it. There's a HUD class, which is basically the heads up display. So this allows you to be a class that's going to be displayed on the screen. Player state, and so this is every player gets a player state. So if you're going, if you're adding, as it said there, player name, score, you could have health and mana and other things in the player state. And if you wanted to manage those in C++, that's where you'd create those. There's the game state base, and so this blueprint function library actually now finally got to the one that I want to create, which is a blueprint function. So what this is saying is, I can create a node that is a function that becomes available in my blueprints to do something. Now what I want to create is that node that I made that was a take two vectors, output one thing. Now, you could see in blueprints, I could just say, oh, this node is actually this blueprint code. I can actually do this all in C++ as well. Why you might want to do some things in C++ is because some things are just easier in C++. You know how to do them, or you've got example code in C++, and the blueprint becomes enormous and messy, and there's some, ridiculously crazy maths happening on the inside, and doing pluses and minuses and matrix multiplication and just all of that stuff in blueprint can look a bit messy. And so what you want to do is use the right language to communicate what you're doing. And if blueprints are the right way of communicating, use those. If C++ is the right way of communicating your complex function, then use the C++. So this is the one we're actually going to do. And so we go a blueprint function library. We go next on that. And here I need to give it a good name, my blueprint library function. So this is my blueprint function library. So this is the class may only contain alphanumeric characters. So this is what I'm going to name. So let's say ground distance. So this is going to be ground distance. As you can see, it's going to create a ground distance.h and a ground distance.cpp. Now, I could actually create a whole function library. So rather than just, creating new classes for every function I want to create, I could create a library that has many functions in it. And so rather than having them all separate into separate things, I could instead call a, trap distance library, and this could have other functions rather than just ground distance. It could have aerial distance, it could have delayed time. I could add other C++ functions in here that would then become available in the blueprints, and so we'll call it trap trap distance at this stage, and that will create an agency, and I'll create class. Right, so that's now adding that adding code to the project. And if I grab, it's also opened my C++ window. So this has opened my Visual Studio Community 2022 window. And so that's what this is. And it's given me a .h file and a .h file and a .cpp file. In the .h file, it's given me the just saying generated body, and it's got no actual functions in here, and the UE5 has been reloaded from outside. So this is outside. So I'm going to reload all, saying telling Unreal 5 that yes, code has been created outside of the project, so you're going to have to reload it. Now, there is actually this hot swapping when you've edited code, get Unreal to hot swap it in. Now, so what I want to do is then work out how do I make the code that's in this library visible inside inside Unreal 5. Now, I'm running and repository. Where are we? I'm just seeing if I've got GitHub Copilot. Where is my Copilot and is it active? I was using Copilot earlier. So, well, we can just see if I put in some comments. So, function that calculates 2D distance from big 3D Right. So as you can see, I'm using GitHub Copilot. And so I have turned on GitHub Copilot, and it's suggested that I use that code, which is float trip distance equals, u trap distance equals a distance of f vector a, and then return f vector dist ab. Okay. So and I can go alt dot to see what other things it suggests. So there it's suggesting I create something that returns a float vector from two f vectors, and these vectors are, I take x, y, and z. That looks pretty good. Oh, live coding succeeded. It just found that out. So let's go back to this, and let's hit enter. So I'm not entirely happy with that one, but if I go alt dot and go to the next one, this one I'm actually happy with that, except I know that I don't need to do this bit, bang, and I don't need to therefore add z. Okay, does that make sense to all of you? Right, so that's the advantage of GitHub Copilot, is you give it a comment, and then it writes the code, and I don't have to remember things about how that works. It might not like the square root here. I may need to require it to do math.square root, but we'll see. Now, that's the CPP. What would the equivalent .h file look like? So let's take that comment, copy that comment, go to my trip.h. Now, because GitHub Copilot understands all of this stuff, when I go in here and say inside my class, it generates body, and then I'm going to have generated body. I think I do it that way, and go like that, and it's going to do okay. Let's see if I can get it to control enter and suggest other things. Oh, okay, so that must be only in right, so that's not going to work. So what I need to do is I'll copy from my CPP, right? I'll save that. This is the function definition. Now, I also need to make it visible to right, so in my header file, I need to make this visible to Unreal so that it knows that it's a visible function. So let's do the standard thing of going to a web page. So I can show you now. You know, I earlier I had I was able to get GitHub Copilot to give me the header file by using the right kind of comment in here, and so if I did function for calculating distance, what would it give me? U function blueprint callable. Ah, that's interesting. As you see, if I do that, it's created a U function that's blueprint callable and given it a category, and then created a static float, which, so the static float means that it's able to run without there being a class attached to it, right? So it's standard C++ static. And this bit here is saying, this is blueprint callable, and category is trip distance. So when this compiles, it'll go, okay, so that's going to be it's going to be visible because it's blueprint callable, and it's going to be in the category. And static means it doesn't need to be instance. And so actually I can just replace that with static float utrip, and then go back here and say, well, actually this should be static, because I don't need the class instantiated. And that, if I save that, okay, so that was letting GitHub Copilot do it, but you know, I also want to be able to Google things for myself. So if you go how to make a function blueprint, I'll call it visible, even though I know the word is going to be callable. So here's a YouTube video of how to expose your functions to blueprints. That's going to be useful. But if we go straight to the Unreal document and extending blueprints, this will also give us some of that detail. So here it's saying, hey, this is what you're going to get. The simplest form is declare class uClass blue printable. And so if we go back, you'll see that it didn't automatically fill that in. And so when I added this bit, it did. And if I go to hot reload, let's see if that forces my Unreal to actually wake up and have this code associated with it. So here, what I want to do is come out and go, let's see, get trap distance. Trap distance. No, that's trap distance. That's get trap distance. That's not the one I want. Has this reloaded? Let's compile. Oh, I'll just attach that. Compile, and let's see if I've got trap. Set trap, get trap. Right, it hasn't given me that function yet, so I need to go back to C++. And let's see if I refresh play. I believe it will reload and rebuild, and so my editor will also get rebuilt. And you see I've also got like a bunch of controlling things going on here. DLL. So we're generating that. Do not show and no. I never like to rebuild without errors. So, okay. Maybe I didn't want to have that there. And the command project. Nope, that's in Microsoft Target. I'll fix the first error and we'll see if that fixes it on the second error. Bad function definition. Okay, let's go and have a look at what the web page is telling me for. So that's the simplest way. uProperty, blueprint, read write, category character, float health. So this would be a uProperty, and so this would be if you're just adding a variable, right? So it's a blueprint, read write variable. executable and overridable functions. So this is what we're looking for: is u function void fire. Let's get rid of the statics and see if it's actually the statics that are giving me the problem. So let's just go with floats because it may be instantiating these functions anyway. And so we'll just remove those two statics and save that, and build. Now, do we have any comments from my Discord people? Nope, no comments there. Okay, so it's not liking that definition of a function. So it's called distance 2D. Bad function definition. Let's go and have a look at the function definition that we've got in here. So that's void fire. So static void. Right. So if I want a U function, so let's check that I'm doing it as a U function. I'm doing it as a U function, and it's blueprint callable, which is there, and I've got a category, which is fine, and I have do I keep the generate body in there, or do I remove that? I've forgotten whether I'll just go through here. So handle target. So that does have this static void rather than a static float return, and this is probably closer to what I'm wanting, which is make a rotator, which returns a more interesting function. So category math rotator keywords, it's added a keywords and native make function. Here it's got those U parameters, which are static parameters, so that you've named what the parameters coming in are. And if we go back and say, okay, so if that's the U parameters, so I need to add those if I do static function that way. Okay, so let's just go back to making this all a wee bit simpler. Distance F vector. What are they calling it? They're calling them, they're floats. I need something that's a vector. See, that's an array of F vector is definitely a thing, right? Because you can see this is an array of F vectors, which is handle and target. So it's got an array of this would be an array of vectors. So U parameter by reference. So maybe if I do U param, it'll give me the U param and we go now. I actually had this working earlier, and so I'm a bit surprised that it's giving me such jip now. Unrecognized type. Yeah, if you spell U param incorrectly, certainly make things harder for it to understand. So let's save that. Oh, uparams bracket it with the display name, and so with the display name and then the actual param. So uparam, and I'll just leave out the display name, I think. And let's see if I can get that to work, and I'll take out those u parameters because I think that is unnecessary. And I'll save that and press play. Now, right, okay, so what I had done previously, which was in 427, doesn't seem to be as easily done. Let's just take an example function and just copy and paste that in. So you can see that this is going to, what they're saying here is that you see even the simpler function, which just has those. We'll grab that and we'll pop that in here, and I'll try the simple thing of just saying, hey, how about I just comment out that function entirely, and we start with the generated text that it's suggesting, and see if that will compile. So I don't like this whole it not showing me what I want it to show me, so let's save that, and this should give me a fail because it doesn't have an implementation anywhere, right? So it hasn't got a function implementation. So right, so it's saying, hey, you're trying to do something that when you've still got the editor open, it doesn't like reloading that from scratch. So this would be closing the editor and opening the editor again, and that's why the hot swap feature is there. So let's go. Distance. So there is a distance between 2D points. Those exist in the mass library, but I'm trying to do 2D distance in a from 2 3-dimensional vectors. And so what I need to do is we can compile so that's giving me this we'll press Control Alt F11 if iterating on code in the working editor or game. So Control Alt. Let's just try the suggestion. Now this piece of code is the code I copied in. It's got that U function of in this case the blueprint pure function, and I think that's because it only occurs in blueprints. You don't call it any other place. This is the category that it gets placed under when you're looking in the blueprint itself, and we've added keywords. I'm not sure about the native make function, that and what that does explicitly. I think I might have to remove that to make this function, or I think it will be fine if I don't have that, but I've still got the meta equals keywords. And here I would change this to being the keywords we want, which is distance. And the math, let's not call it math rotate, let's call it math distance. And so here it'll be taking these 3 votes. I want to later change that to a vector, and I want to implement this function in my CPP, which will need to have, I think, I do need to tell it to the class that it's in. Doing that. Right, and that would be returning an F rotator. So under that, I would give myself, right, so that is GitHub Copilot suggesting what I should return, and doing it that way. So let's see, so this would be the rotator, which is what it's suggesting it's trying to do. Oh, no, that won't work. I'll have to go back and reload it in. Right, so let's go and so failed to link patch. So that was a fail to patch. I was trying to do the patch. So what I'll do is I'll go and see if we go. Actually, to make things easier to find, let's just, because I know I don't have any other functions called Simon, just to make this function easier to find, let's go make rotator Simon. That way, when I search for Simon, it will be the only one with the name Simon in it, so you guys will be able to see it being made. So we save that, and we save that, and I was pretty sure we could hot reload it. And if I jump into Unreal, and we'll turn off context sensitive as well. So, because sometimes if it's context sensitive, it won't show you all the functions that are available. So if we close the blueprint editor, close that editor, and save selected. Right. Now let's spin this up. Okay, so what we've got here is, if we're looking through, we've got this, which should generate this rotator, make rotator with a return value, and it's got that C++ and H file. I'm just reloading the Unreal. And you can see here it's still building. Now, in terms of where this appears, you can see over here that we have the source code, and this is trip distance, or trap distance, should be being saved in where did it get saved? In source assignment 1. So it should be under here. weird. Why isn't it being saved there? Alright, that's just going to lift it out of that location. It's v.h. It is saved in the. It is in the full path is in the .h. So I would have thought that it read it there. I'll have to find out why that is. Oh, if rotator is not a member of U-trap distance, if rotator is not a member of U-trap distance. I need to add the math libraries for it, so that this F rotator is in the right is included in the right place. Okay, so this is being more irritating than I would have liked it to be. So, because before I was able to add this really easily, and I'm not sure why this is being so much harder this time around. Probably because I'm live coding it, and live coding always makes things more likely to fail. So what I'll do is I'll just do that, and let's just go back to, let's just do a simple thing of adding a U property and saving that, and I'll take this and put it in here, because simply adding a printable value is going to be easier, because this is a float that it understands. I can add the word health, and this should, in the blueprint function, U property, blueprint rewrite, max health. So it's suggesting the same way of doing it. Let's just get character health. Let's see what GitHub Copilot suggests. Yeah. And why is it saying private member? So do I need to actually put the public before that? Public, and I'm sorry this is being irritating. I'm assuming it needs that generate body because it will then, it's a function that it calls to generate the normal component bodies. But it's still saying that that's a private okay. Now one of the things you sometimes have to watch out for is when it does this and is giving you a 4.27. So let's go and have a look to make sure that the 5 is doing right. So that's grab that content, even though I made the class, and I will go and do the simplest thing that it just suggested. Right? And include blueprintable class is I've got a uClass blueprintable. This is in the 5 version, and I should be able to use that and put that in. Put it outside the actor, surely, because that's in the wrong place. That's going to say no, that you need to be inside the class. And when I play that, missing public. Need to make the class public as well. Interesting. That's okay. That's surprisingly annoying. Because I would have thought by making that class public, maybe I need to put it before the U class. Ha! This is being this was much easier last time I did it. And I'm not sure why it's giving me such jip this time. So let's have a look at what have I missed from this explanation. That is looking exactly right, and that should be able to be in there, and then that should be able to be in there. See, I have actually been able to do this, and I can show you a vector function that I created in one I baked earlier. It's just that I don't want to sort of, go, oh, there's magic, you just do it. I want to show you me actually struggling with it as well, and say, well, okay, what should this class look like? Well, here I've been struggling, I've been looking at this bit, so what I would then do is actually say blue or C++, yes? Yep, I'd love a guess.
Because it says there's a missing public and inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
The inheritance is the bit that goes colon and then afterwards. So I imagine you have to do public after the colon. Like public, sorry. So colon public A action.
Public in there.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Well, we can say that. I'm quite happy for people to give me good input. Hopefully you guys are also doing something useful rather than just sitting here being frustrated by me. You can see sometimes the stuff is not doing exactly what it should. And if let's see, it should run. Missing colon after public. See, I'm not sure it's that's the public problem. So because I would have thought that the actor was a public thing, but it's also wanting a public after the colon, so, or yeah, colon after public. So we'll just see what it tries to do with that. I still think that's, I think colon after. Yeah, so what I'm thinking is if anybody has any other suggestions, I'm happy to listen to them. Actually,
I saw it on a forum as well.
so
Yeah, I don't see any obvious syntactic problems there.
because I don't think that's the syntax. No. So yeah, I'm so what I was looking at is saying, well, if I was to find a C++ example of code, then, and sometimes at the ends of these, so at the ends of these things where they'll give you if you look down the bottom here, sometimes they'll give you a download which has all of the actual code. That one doesn't look like it does. Class creation basics, blueprints only, C++ only. Let's see. It's going to take us there. So basically what we're looking at is this U property and U function specifies, you make the saying whether they're visible and whether they're what type they are, and so this gives you a full class that you can download and therefore edit, and that gives you the C and the CPP for a light switch function. So one other option is that we grab all of this and put it into our function here. So this has got the blueprint function library and trap distance generated H, which is why I think it still needs that generated body, because that's a macro to grab and build new things in here, which is why that's actually there. And though I'm annoyed that it's not liking this U property, which is what the thing says to have. And if we have a look in this one, we have public actor is like that. So we certainly didn't need that one. Let's go public actor and class project name API. So that's light switch both. So the class actor, right, so when this class needs to be trip distance. And when I created it, didn't. So this is creating as a public A actor, and this is the project API. I don't know if I need that bit. It's using the generate body. It's then got the public definitions here. So public colon, and it's got these U properties with classes, so that's more complex, but I've just got a U property which is going to be a function, and category. Right, so let's see if by those two combined. Now this is unfortunately something you do often have to do. Missing class name. distance.h. I thought so. So in terms of AI light switch both, that is AI light switch. Well, that's light switch both. I need project API. Well, let's go back to how it was. Let's just go back to how it was when I first got it out, when it auto created. There we go. So it does have the API. It's U trip distance and it's public blueprint library. So it's not an actor. So let's try just grabbing the U function library out of this and saying, well, hey, you guys want me to be able to do a that would just be a function that is a void function with no parameters coming into it. But we'll go the simpler route and just go a single editable property and go back and say, well, if it gives me with this an issue with this U property being public, then I'll add that public. So what I've done here is, having played with stuff and got somewhere, missing class. That's the old code, surely. Save, build. Because there is no line 17, that's better. Private members. So here is where I would then add that public colon and say, well, okay, let's make all of this next bit public, and so that should get rid of this issue here of it saying that it's private, but it should not be used on if I save it and build it. What's it? It appears that my problem was, or one of my problems was, I wasn't saving things properly. And so I was running it on the previous build of things. That would be really annoying. So this one wasn't forcing it to save. And so once I saved it and recompiled it, it actually loaded and ran it. That's really annoying. So sorry, very, very sorry. That's a trick for new players, including me, is that because I hadn't saved when I made the changes, when I used this button to start without debugging, it compiled the code as it had been rather than as it was, which means when I was trying those changes and saying, why isn't this working, it wasn't actually using that change. It was still using the old code and giving me the wrong errors. So that succeeded. So what I now need to do is, now I should be able to go to, GitHub Copilot's already suggesting something else, but here I could do 2D distance from 3D vector. And what's it gonna, oh, come back to me. Haha, it thinks that it's wanting to do it's wanting to do that U property health again. So that GitHub is not doing a great job of understanding what I meant from so return float distance from 3D vector. Let's see if it knows what that is. Guess distance from vector. So that's going to be float, get distance, and so that I'm going to say get 2D distance, and I'm going to call that Simon so I can find it more easily. So this health thing that we've just added, right? So that is actually going to be in now in my Unreal Engine code, wherever that started up. There it is. And so now when I go into the blueprint of this, actually any blueprint, but if I open Blueprint Editor, and so you see I've got this class called trip distance here, which is what we called the class, right? Because I was generally, but it's got a get health and a set health, right? So I now have a health thing which has a target self, and it's something that is a function that variable health. It's been added as something that I can grab a float out of for in the blueprints, right? And you remember because I called it trap distance, and that was so yes, there was, and under this class which I added, there is now within trap distance there is a get health and set health, because those are variables that I set up in that class. So if we go back, so that's showing you successfully that it's set up. I had to add this public thing to say, well, actually this is public, so you should be able to see it. I've now got this function get 2D distance Simon, which has been added, and it's this U function which says, oh, it's blueprint callable, and which category should it be under, is kind of where it occurs on the list on the side here. So graphs, functions, variables, add variable, and I can add a variable type, and I just have to find where it has category. Okay, so that's under the default categories. I've already put it in here, so that's created a new variable there. But so the category actually basically just lists where it will show up. But if we go back to the C++ code, I've added this function. There is an implementation for that function, so if I save that and I grab that and I copy that and I put it into, now I should be able to go, not that one, but that one. So let's get rid of that one, because that was the crazy rotator that I didn't want. And I'll just put this in. Thank you for your help, those two people. So, and this would be distance, and I've called it, to make it completely unique and different to anything else you might find anywhere else in the actual library. So get distance city, so it takes two float vectors, f vector location 1, location 2. Let's copy the signature of the function and make it the same. F vector location 1, location 2, and so we would actually need to make sure that those are correct, and that is correct, and then return that and get rid of that comment and save that and that, and now this might complain that I have to close my editor for it to update, But let's see what it does. Still compiling, still running this header code. Right. Yep. So that's what I expect. So if I go over to this code and go Control Alt F11, it's brought up my live coding environment and it's got me errors. So float distance redeclaration of a member is not allowed. And that's in the CPP. So what I did is I incorrectly in the CPP had the colon there, semicolon there, which said, oh, this is a function header rather than a function description. So that's annoying. So I go back here and do that Control Alt F11 again. Patch. Woot! Live coding succeeded. Ha! Yay! Live coding succeeded. Just there, right there. Yep. Live coding succeeded. Now. Ha! So yes, victory. So now what I've got is I should be able to pull off here and go. There it is. Get Simon's distance 2D. And that's now actually a proper function that you can see is called get 2D distance Simon, and it takes in 2 locations because that's what I said it should take. Is it should take an F vector and an F vector, and it's saying, hey, what F vectors do you want? And now I can grab that F vector and put it in there, and I can grab that F vector and put it in there, and I can disconnect that. Well, actually, I can leave that one connected. It's not going anywhere. And now I have my return value coming in through these 2 locations. This is a function, so as I said before, it's not a macro, so it wants to be called because it needs a function call. So this isn't just a macro that would be put inside things. And so what I need to do is I need to actually call this function in between these 2. So if I just go, I shift click, click that, and then shift click there, and then click there, and shift click. Shift click that one and that one. Oh, I'll just try them. Okay, so. Yeah, so I've got my event tick coming in. It will run this function and then go to the branch. And what I'll do is I shall add in here a watch this value. Watch this value, so you can see the return value coming in there. And let's see. Compile. Error. This blueprint self is not a trip distance. Therefore, okay. This trip is not a trip. This blueprint self is not a trip distance. Must be a connection Okay, so I'll have to move that up so I can see it properly. Compile, queue failed, there are warnings. Okay, so the blueprint self is not a trip distance. Ha! Why is that requiring self? What are we got in here that is requiring it to have self? Maybe it doesn't want me to do that specifically, because, but surely it needs to know which. Ah, yes. You have to go into the editor and go Control Alt F11 to recompile it. Okay. And error. Still needs self. Interesting. So I have to work out why that is now happening. So we're getting closer. You can see that you know I can do stuff here, and it turns up there. It's got this name. It wants two functions in. It's going to return that. In here, I can remove that property. Let's say we don't need that property. This is a U function blueprint callable, which is fine. Category character should be fine, and those two should be fine. Well, let's go and find. So the blueprint self is not a blueprint self is not a let's see what the blueprint self is not a. So this is a suggestion that yeah, must have made a rookie blunder. Player 4 unfortunately named. Let's see. So in my other function, I didn't actually. I've not had this one. Trip distance object reference. So why do I need a trip distance object reference? And can I feed that any object? Right, so no, it needs to have a trip distance. Okay, my thought, and I'll take you through my thought process of what I'm thinking, is because these aren't defined as static, I do need an instance of this for it to run. And so if I define this as static, then I'm thinking that these might be able to run without it instantiating a class of the function, because if you're if you're not static, it in C++ you need an instance of the class, so I would need to generate the class. Now how I would do that in a blueprint would probably be I'd have to do something like new class. What is there'll be a way of creating a class. So there'd be instantiating the class, and so I could create a class that is a target. So instantiate instance, or is it new? And we'll make that context sensitive, so it actually nope. Crap. Okay, I'd have to look that up. But one option would be to try and create a new instance of that class, and then hand that class into this. So instead of being that, it would be. So it wouldn't be self. It would be something else. But if I make those static, I believe if I'll just compile that, make sure that that's all good. Control Alt F11. Having made those static, I think it won't need the instance of the class to run. So I could try and solve this in both ways. I could try and solve it by all right. So should we wait for instructions on how to work with Git and no, start working with Git. Just don't worry about start working with Unreal. Just don't worry about the version control saving stuff. Failed to patch. What was the error? Interesting. So when I go back to here, static float, okay, so it's not suggesting there is a problem outside, but if I Control Shift 11 in here, okay, so it looks like I need to clean that. So still asking for the self because it still needs that there because it hasn't successfully cleaned the build, because this change is changing the object type. It's a more of a change. What I'll do is I'll just do the one more thing and save selected and build with those being static. And so this hopefully will do a clean build and do the link properly. Oh. Unresolved external thing with public static float. So that's stating that it doesn't like this to be defined as a static in here with a C++ implementation. Because it seems to be that this is that is the same, isn't it? And there's that, but just missing that. Same. Build, rebuild. Okay, let's go to here. Adding function to blueprint.
Hey Simon,
Yep.
I saw something online that says you may have to put your, see in your header if you scroll up here, you might have to put new trap distance prefix on the actual function inside your CPP.
So in here, add the in here add the U trap distance specifier. I'm still compiling the old version to see if it's going to give me an error. But that might, yeah, because if this is a static, it may need to know that this is the implementation of that static function, using that naming. But I'm still running down here. You can still see there that I've got a wee compile icon saying that it's still operating and still working. And so while it's still doing that, I'll go back to here. 120. Right, I need to take a break because I need to go and look after my children because my son's going out for a second. I'll be back in a minute. I shall stop my recording. Hopefully this will not take forever to do. And I can okay. Trap, not trip, yes. Okay, so right, let's try rebuilding that. And I'll just go and sort out my kids to see. Hey, William.
Mummy?
Hmm?
Mummy?
What?
Mummy?
No, I need you to talk properly.
I'm saying Mum!
Yes. What? None not here, yeah? Not here. Why were you asking me when I was not here?
No, you were just pushing me along with you.
my blue screen, not blue screening properly. Okay, it's still compiling down there. Okay, so what have we got in here? That looks like an error. That should not be used on a member function defined in file scope. Try saying okay, that's different. Right, so it's spinning it up. It seems to not mind me calling one static and the other not. And it's spinning up Unreal now, at least. So we'll see what Unreal does. And we'll just see how Unreal. So this is actually tracking this is tracking the CPU performance and is debugging within Visual Studio Code what's happening as the Visual Studio the Unreal editor is loading. It's 85, 86. Still loading. Ah, right. Finish loading. And then it will do the top-down template. And let's go to select that, go to the blueprint class, open blueprint editor. Ha! Get distance from. So now the self has disappeared. Finally. And let's see if I hook that in and hook that in and then hook that in and hook that in and then add a watch to that and press play. What do we have? Ooh. Ooh, have I succeeded? If we look closer at that, we have it's watching that. Watch what value is it watching there? It's 4.3. That looks like it's probably going to be the right value. So if I now walk this character around, it's getting less and less, and boom, because it got under 100. Okay, there you go. Took me much longer than it should have taken, but that was adding that C++. But you see, one of the nice things is once you've got one added, you can then look at how simple it is to add lots of other functions in C++. You saw it added a health thing there. That static was how to remove the self, because the self needed to, because if it wasn't static, it would need an instance of the class to run, otherwise I have to create the class. Now it is just a static. Okay, so I've got to stop now and go and help my son, and I'll be back in 10 minutes once my son is away. So I'll be back at in 10 minutes, and then we can chat if you've got any other questions. Okay, can you see how we kind of eventually got there? And you can see that function's running. So if I stop that, we now have these two ways. One is a blueprint graph, one is my C++ code, and I could add any C++ code into that function to do other things that I was keen on. If I wanted to make a macro that was like this one, then it would not be a blueprint function that would be executed and called. It would have to be macro. So that's a different thing indeed. Okay, so good luck. Go and play with that. I will make a new updated video of this, which is actually me doing it properly in one go rather than playing around. I don't know if any of that playing around was useful for you. Hopefully some of my narrating of what I was trying to do is somewhat useful, just to make you feel better about, maybe you don't, maybe you see me struggle and you go, okay, Simon struggled with it. It's okay that I struggled and took an hour to get it sorted, or an hour and a half.
Like this has to have moments with code. It happens.
And I had done it successfully the other night, and it just worked. And I thought, oh, this will be easy. And so I tried to do it again from scratch, and it's kind of, and I didn't want to do the baked-in thing of saying, oh, I prepared one earlier, and just drop it and say, see, it's easy. And well, you did that earlier. I don't know how long it took you.
Control-C, Control-V is very easy.
But yes, a code I prepared earlier. But no, so this was all done from scratch, and me also going and have a look at stuff. So hopefully that made some sense. I'll make a shorter video of me just doing it properly. You can also go and find other people doing it, though most are doing it in 4.2.7 rather than 5, though mostly 5 should be the same. But hopefully some of that discussion, also the statics was clear. Remembering to save before you press play, coming in here, if you're only changing the code inside your functions, then the Control Alt F11 will work really well. Okay, to reload code, it's that I was changing something from being dynamic to being static, that it didn't really like me trying to reload that, saying, oh, that's quite a big change. I don't know how to deal with that. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop.